Only 1 in 10 would come home. That was the silent truth whispered among the young men climbing into the B-24 Liberator, America's most produced heavy bomber of World War II. To the public, it was a symbol of power. With its 4 roaring engines and massive bomb load, the B-24 promised to bring Nazi Germany to its knees. Newspapers hailed it as the workhorse of the skies, the weapon that would help win the war. But inside the frozen metal fuselage, crews quickly discovered another reality. The Liberator was cramped, unforgiving, and terrifyingly fragile. Its thin aluminum skin rattled under enemy fire, its oxygen lines froze at high altitudes, and its high wings made it fly like a stubborn beast. It could carry more bombs and fly farther than the famous B-17, but at a terrible cost. Every mission over Europe was a gamble with death. Anti-aircraft flak shredded formations, Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulf struck with merciless precision, and fire spread through the B-24's fuel-filled wings like a torch. Crews would watch friends vanish in fireballs midair, their screams swallowed by the engines and wind. By the end of the war, the numbers were devastating. Tens of thousands dead, entire squadrons erased in hours. This is the story of the B-24 Liberator, the bomber that promised victory, but delivered sacrifice on a scale almost too great to imagine. And what those young men endured inside it is far darker than most history books dare to reveal. By 1942, the skies over Europe had become the deadliest battlefield on Earth. The Allies had promised to strike at the very heart of Hitler's empire, not by invading with ground troops just yet, but by sending waves of bombers deep into Germany itself. The strategy was brutal in its simplicity: destroy factories, cripple railroads, burn refineries, and break the Nazi war machine from above. But geography made this mission nearly suicidal. From bases in England, a Liberator crew faced up to 10 hours in the air. That meant flying over the North Sea, across occupied France, and into the most heavily defended airspace in the world. Weather was unpredictable, with blinding fog and ice storms that froze guns solid. And once inside Germany, every city was a fortress of steel and fire. For the Americans, the B-24 was a tool of necessity. It could carry heavier bomb loads and reach distant targets like Berlin, Ploiești, and the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heart of Hitler's Reich. For the Germans, defending those skies was a matter of survival. Every refinery spared meant more tanks rolling, more aircraft flying, more war dragging on. So the Luftwaffe threw everything into the fight. Flak guns lined rooftops, riversides, and factory courtyards. Fighter wings lurked just beyond radar range, ready to pounce. No bomber was ever truly safe, not even at 25,000 feet. The stakes were clear. Whoever controlled the skies would control the war. And the young men inside the B-24 were asked to pay the price, mission after mission, for that chance at victory. When the B-24 Liberator first arrived in Europe, it was entrusted to men barely out of high school, crews trained in the flat skies of Texas, Arizona, and California, now suddenly thrown into the unpredictable weather of England. Their commanders, men like General Iris C. Eaker of the 8th Air Force, carried the heavy responsibility of proving America's doctrine of daylight precision bombing. Unlike the British, who struck cities at night in massive area raids, the Americans promised to hit specific factories, rail yards, and refineries in broad daylight. It was a bold strategy, and it would cost thousands of lives to test it. The training had been rushed. A Liberator crew needed to function as one machine, pilot and co-pilot guiding the heavy bomber, navigator and bombardier charting the way, gunners crouched at every window, scanning the skies. In Texas, they had practiced formation flying in clear blue weather, but no training could replicate the black clouds of German flak or the silver streaks of Messerschmitts diving at 400 miles per hour. On the ground, preparations were immense. Airfields across eastern England were transformed into sprawling fortresses of steel and fuel. Mechanics worked day and night to patch bullet holes, change engines, and load bombs into cavernous bays. Intelligence officers pinned maps to briefing room walls, tracing lines from England to targets deep inside occupied Europe. Yet intelligence often failed them. Reconnaissance photographs underestimated flak batteries. Reports claimed German fighters were overstretched, when in reality the Luftwaffe had honed deadly interception tactics. Pilots were assured losses would be acceptable. In truth, whole formations were sometimes swallowed by fire before reaching their target. The mood before each mission was almost unbearable. Crews gathered in dim briefing rooms, listening as their commanding officers unveiled the day's target. Cigarette smoke thickened the air, hands clenched nervously on coffee mugs. Some men stared straight ahead, memorizing every word. Others prayed silently. Outside, the countryside was quiet, dew clinging to the grass, engines still cold. Only the distant rumble of trucks carrying bombs to the airstrips betrayed what was coming. In those final minutes before takeoff, the silence was deceptive. Dogs barked near the barracks. A breeze carried the smell of fuel across the field. The men climbed into their Liberators, strapping themselves into freezing metal seats, oxygen masks hanging ready at their sides. They adjusted goggles, tested intercoms, and waited for the signal. Then, as the first engines roared to life and the ground shook beneath them, the calm shattered. The long war in the skies over Europe was about to begin. The first combat missions for the B-24s seemed deceptively straightforward. Targets were rail yards in France, submarine pins along the coast, or refineries that kept Hitler's war machine alive. The men believed that once they reached altitude and formed up, the bombers' sheer numbers and firepower would protect them. Flying fortresses in the sky, they were told. Reality struck as soon as the Liberators crossed the channel. Over the gray waters, fog rolled in thick and sudden, swallowing formations whole. Pilots struggled to keep their wings aligned, terrified of mid-air collisions. The freezing altitudes turned cockpits into ice chambers. Oxygen lines froze solid, guns jammed, and frostbite ate through gloves. Some crews never even saw the enemy before mechanical failure forced them back home. But for those who pressed on, the enemy revealed a ruthless design. German radar tracked the bombers long before they reached their targets. Flak batteries waited in layers, timed to explode at exact altitudes. Black bursts filled the sky like a wall of shrapnel, shaking Liberators so violently that crews swore the wings would rip free. Men heard the metallic thud of fragments ripping through aluminum, sometimes followed by the scream of a comrade struck inside the fuselage. Then came the fighters. Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s swooped in from above and below, exploiting the Liberators' blind spots. Gunners fired desperately, tracer rounds arching through the sky. Sometimes they scored a kill, a German fighter spiraling down in flames, a cheer erupting over the intercom. Those were the fleeting moments of hope, the proof that maybe the mission could be survived. But the victories were small, and the losses were crushing. Whole squadrons vanished in smoke and fire. Parachutes blossomed against the sky, drifting helplessly into enemy territory. Radios crackled with half-finished calls before cutting to static. Yet even as formations staggered home, riddled with holes, commanders declared the raids a success. Bombs had been dropped, targets hit, proof the strategy could work. Crews tried to believe it. They patched bullet holes with sheet metal, buried their dead, and prepared to climb aboard once more. Still, a gnawing dread grew with each mission. The enemy was learning their patterns, tightening the noose with every raid. What had begun as daring strikes now looked like slow-motion slaughter. The men didn't know it yet, but the true test, the missions that would etch the Liberator into history, was looming just ahead. And compared to what awaited over the heart of Germany, these early battles were only the prelude. Dawn, engines thunder. Dozens of B-24s rolled down the slick English runways, their bomb bays packed with tons of explosives. Crews braced for the long haul east. Today's target, the oil refineries at Ploiești, Romania, the lifeblood of Hitler's war machine. The mission will live in infamy. Hours later, the Liberators approach their target. The sky grows darker with smoke. The smell of burning oil rides the wind long before the bombs fall. The men tighten oxygen masks, hearts hammering, eyes locked on the horizon. Then chaos. Flak erupts like a storm. Black bursts fill the air, each one a jagged blossom of steel. Shrapnel tears through thin aluminum skin. Wings rattle, engines cough. Inside the fuselage, the air reeks of cordite, fuel, and blood. A gunner screams as hot metal rips into his chest. The radio crackles. "We've lost number 3 engine." Another voice, panicked. "We're hit. We're going down." The sound of tearing metal fills the intercom before it cuts to silence. German fighters dive in. Bf-109 slash through the formations, cannon fire hammering the bombers. Focke-Wulf 190 circle from behind, spitting bursts that shred tail sections. A Liberator explodes midair, a fireball so bright it blinds nearby crews. The shockwave rocks other bombers, scattering them into the killing zone. Gunners fight back. 50 caliber machine guns thunder from every angle. The smell of burnt gunpowder chokes the compartments. Casings clatter to the floor. A tail gunner tracks a Messerschmitt, holds steady, fires, and watches it disintegrate in flames. Cheers erupt, but only for a heartbeat. Another enemy swoops in, riddling the bomber with holes. Inside, men work frantically. Navigators clutch maps spotted with sweat and blood. Bombardiers steady their sights as the target looms below, smoke rising like a funeral pyre. Pilots wrestle heavy controls, the plane shuddering under strain. Every nerve screams, just hold together, just a little longer. Below, the refineries burn. Bombs fall. Some hit true, erupting in geysers of flame. Others miss wide, tearing apart villages, homes, lives. For the Germans on the ground, there is no safety. Civilians run through smoke-choked streets. Soldiers fire flak guns until the barrels glow red. Both sides trapped in the inferno, neither able to escape. Losses mount. Liberator after Liberator plummets. Engines aflame, wings torn away. Parachutes bloom against the sky, fragile white dots drifting into enemy hands. Some don't open at all. Still, the formations press on. Orders are clear. Drop the bombs. Cripple the refineries, no matter the cost. Hours later, what's left of the force limps back across the Mediterranean. The air smells of burnt oil, of sweat, of death. Crews slump in silence. Blood soaks the metal floor. Empty gun mounts stare into the void. They've hit the target. They've proved it can be done. But the cost is unbearable. Out of hundreds of bombers, nearly half never return. Thousands of men gone in a single day. And in that moment, a grim realization sets in. This is not victory. This is attrition. A war of endurance. A war where survival itself feels like defeat. The skies have become a slaughterhouse. And the crews of the B-24 now know the worst is still to come. When the surviving Liberators finally reached their bases, the runways were lined with ground crews waiting in silence. They counted the returning planes one by one. Each arrival both a relief and a bitter reminder of those missing. The vast formations that had thundered into the skies that morning returned in broken fragments. Wings patched with smoke, tails shredded, bomb bays empty. The cost was staggering. On the Ploiești raid alone, out of 177 Liberators launched, 53 were lost. Hundreds of airmen killed. Hundreds more taken prisoner, marched through hostile villages into captivity. In one day, entire squadrons ceased to exist. Stories of individual fates spread quickly through the bases. Some crews ditched in the sea and were never seen again. Others bailed out and were captured, their war reduced to the walls of a prison camp. A few lucky ones limped home on a single engine, dragging broken wings over the English coastline to a crash landing that ended in cheers and tears. Commanders, like General Uzel Ent, who had led the daring strike, were hailed for their courage, but even they knew the price had been beyond calculation. For the Germans, the oil still flowed. The refineries at Ploiești burned for days, but repairs began almost immediately. The strike proved the Liberators could reach deep into enemy territory, but it also showed just how costly such missions would be. The aftermath forced both sides to adapt. The Americans began demanding long-range escort fighters, realizing bombers alone could not survive the gauntlet. The Luftwaffe, bloodied but unbroken, tightened its defenses further, waiting for the next wave. The mission was over. The numbers were written down. The men were buried or captured. But for those who had flown into the storm, one truth remained. Nothing about this war would ever be easy, and the skies over Europe had only just begun to exact their price. History remembers the B-24 Liberator as both a triumph and a tragedy. It was the most produced American bomber of the war, more than 18,000 built, and it carried destruction deep into the Reich, to Ploiești, Berlin, Vienna, and beyond. It proved that the Allies could reach the heart of Nazi industry, no matter the cost. But that cost was written in blood. Nearly 30,000 airmen of the 8th Air Force alone never returned, many of them from B-24 crews. For every factory destroyed, for every bridge shattered, there were fathers, brothers, and sons who never came home. The lessons changed the war. The desperate losses forced the U.S. to introduce long-range escort fighters like the P-51 Mustang, turning daylight bombing from suicide missions into a sustained campaign. And when victory finally came, it was bought in part by those early sacrifices, by men who flew into the storm knowing the odds were stacked against them. Today, the Liberator stands as a symbol of endurance. Museums display its hulking frame, while survivors tell stories of frostbitten skies, burning fuel, and friendships forged in terror. Yet behind the hardware, the true legacy lies in the silence of the empty chairs left behind. The B-24 won battles, but it also taught us a brutal truth. In war, victory is measured not just in what is gained, but in what is lost forever.